All right, here we go. This could be a complete disaster, but anyway, an impromptu contest entry um, for Dennis over at Analog Archives. Uh, we were reaching. Congrats to Dennis on hitting 2,000 subscribers. I think the contest ends at the when this month finishes. So I wanted to make a concerted effort to enter this contest, and my wife and I are getting ready to leave for West Virginia with some friends this weekend. So if it's got to be now or never, right? So I know when Dennis got 1,000 subscribers, did one of these, and I just couldn't get off my. Did not enter, and it's completely my failure. So we did not want to miss this opportunity to congratulate Dennis. And we'll get this stream out there and talk about sophomore records. So hopefully everyone's had a good week. Happy Friday to everyone, and we'll get into this contest entry. So the assignment that Dennis gave everyone was 10 sophomore releases. It didn't have to be metal, but just 10 sophomore releases that were as good or potentially better than the debut. And I just going to all kind of, before we jump into the contest and show off some records, I'll talk a little bit about Dennis. So I think the first time I actually saw him and his channel was during the COVID streams. I could be wrong about that. Over that, I guess a handful of guys like Marty and Ben, Eric Bauer, Pat from Ground Zero Salem, Matt, now at the no longer active Dark Path. Anyway, Jason Hook, Devin Mesa Torment. Anyway, a bunch of guys were doing the COVID streams. And I think like there were a few people that came in later on that were invited. And Dennis was one of them, and got a hold of his channel. And for the most part, for anyone who's seen it, he's got a very, very impressive collection. Like there are some people on YouTube who you tune in for because they're always on top of new stuff, or they're really good at potentially bringing unheard of content, just sort of left field stuff that no one else talks about. I guess Dennis is a bit more of the latter. I feel his channel definitely focuses on older material, not so much like new whatever stuff that's coming out, but you're going to not only probably catch records, artists that you've never heard of, but you'll also probably get a glimpse into someone who has a lot of original pressings, first-time pressings, a bunch of stuff that no one else can really, you will rarely see, just because he's been on an incredible job sort of holding on to records over the course of the year or years and decades. So it's cool to see someone who has a lot of like very difficult to find stuff, but that's specifically talking about the metal. There's probably two things I want to add before we jump into my collection, which is he also, you don't get a glimpse into Dennis's diversity very often as a listener, but every once in a while he'll pull some stuff off the shelf, and it's something that rarely, like, I don't think anyone would assume given like the kind of content on his channel that he listens to. But I think if you were to get a glimpse, you come into his record collection and check out the breadth of it, there's a lot of stuff that extends beyond metal and crossover and hardcore, etc. I think he just did a contest entry of his own that he got a glimpse to sort of pull out some of the stuff that he listens to outside of metal. And it was cool to get a chance to look at that stuff. So a very diverse collection, outside of like the obviously appeal of early stuff. And then on top of that, I think what I was going to say, I completely forgot my point, Dennis. So sorry. But I was just gonna say, like, he's also someone who's similar to my entry with Mark. Like, I feel he's very inclusive in terms of, all the stuff that, like, people he interacts with. He doesn't sort of judge and, like, stick to a very narrow lane in terms of who he interacts with in the VC, outside of the metal community, different kinds of channels. I think this weekend, Jeff and Dennis are doing a like hidden gems of the 80s, which is a continued series that they do, but you can check that out. But that being said, I think it's time for me to stop praising Dennis and jump into some records here. So I pulled aside, I think, 7 metal records for him. And then after that, there's some non-metal records. I did more than 10, I guess, altogether, but nonetheless, we will jump into the records here and get my official entry into this.
Does he have a gang name or alias like Death Snake, Big Dan, Hellfire, Little Smurf, Twin, Nacho, Viper, Mad Dog, Clown, Loco, or Baby Chico?
Okay, so first thing we got, let's pull out the metal records to begin with. I'll close with the non-metal ones. All right. And I don't know, this is kind of my first sort of impromptu live thing, but before we jump into this, I'll play some music here. So let's go with, I had a bunch of cassettes pulled aside for Dennis. Okay, so let's go with this. This is Initiation. It's a demo Swedish band. They have since put out some more material, but it's a bit more black and thrash. This is a little bit more on the death metal side. I don't know. This may get turned off, right, for a copyright violation, but maybe because I'm talking over it. I don't know. I've seen other people do these streams, and they played music throughout and played records. Hopefully this works. We'll see. If I get kicked off suddenly, too bad, right? Okay. Let's talk about some records. So to start this, I think Dennis currently lives in Nevada. I could be wrong about that, but he is from California, and it's a part of the channel. He definitely reps California. And I wanted to start with a few picks that would bring to light sort of California bands and records, etc. So the first 3 here. Sophomore records. Once again, the assignment was sophomore records that are as good or potentially better than the debut. Turn that down. Okay. There we go. Too quiet? Once again, this is Initiation from Sweden that we got going in the background there. Okay, debut release. I'm sorry, sophomore release. There we go. This is Omen, Warning of Danger. This is my first choice here. This is also, I should say, now this record's been partied on a good deal, so it's not like in mint condition, whatever, but I do believe this is the OG press. I thought it'd be important to start with that. Metal Blade release there for you. Classic American power metal. There's the sleeve with the gentleman. I won't do that with all these records, but I will pull them out since this one's so cool. Anyway, Omen, yeah. I would say, like, their first 3 records are classic. Maybe got the Metal Blade, but this is, easily as good as the debut. I know some people think this is their best record. I love a lot of this band's work. Definitely sad to kind of see them fall off and disappear into the 90s. Um, but obviously the death of J.D. Kimball is super sad. But uh, what are you gonna do? Classic California American power metal band. So that's pick number one. Keep it California here. Moving on. So now I've been into Omen for a while, but this next artist has been a recent. It was hard for me to get into the following record, and it was just because the following sort of scene is something I stayed away from for so long. It just really wasn't kind of where I wanted to spend time when I was listening to metal. But second record here is Motley Crue. Shout at the devil. This is not an OG press. This is like a whatever reissue. But yeah, like Motley Crue's just a lot of the whatever Los Angeles glam scene always for me felt like something that was on the opposite end of the spectrum of whatever I'd be into. I just didn't get it. But the more it's one of the same thing with like a lot of traditional heavy metal, where the more and more time I spent around mostly an older generation who are constantly sort of pressing me to try and reinvestigate it and spend more time with it. And here I am jumping back into it. And, there's some of these, like, I get it, right? Like some of the songs, they kind of are pop in structure. So I can understand why they had so much like a commercial sort of appeal in the 1980s, but like the side two of this, there's some really, the Red Hot, that the move from that song into side B here into Too Young to Fall in Love, like that's one of those songs that just absolutely good to get stuck in my head. I really dig that track. And while they, I don't know, I'll spend more time with, I guess, bands from this scene, from this era, but this was sort of my first dive into Motley Crue, and I've enjoyed this record. Definitely, like this is summer kind of stuff, right? When it's hot outside and you want to just like relax and have a good time. Motley Crue, shout at the devil, man. Just the outfits, everything. Like it took me a while to get here, but here I am, right? So that's number two. Good to see people dropping in here. Happy to have you. In case you missed it, record number one was Omen, A Warning of Danger. So two California bands, and we're going to close it out with something that's a bit more. Oh, all right, Adam. I mean, I'll take that for sure. I have no problem. But if anyone wants to go watch people debate anything Dokken, you got two, Jeff and Brian are here. So we move from, start with Omen, moving to Crue. The next thing I have here is from California as well. So here's my three California records. Now, hold on one second. So this is definitely a bit more my lane. This is Deeds of Flesh and Inbreeding the Anthropophagy. So this is the OG press, right, on Repulse. It originally came out on CD. I wanted it on vinyl. And hold on, let me jump in and say, hey. Yeah, so I wanted this Deeds of Flesh on vinyl. And it got a repress. Now, it was different. There's a bunch of different people who have repressed this since its release. I picked out the Osmos release. The album artwork's not quite right perfect. There's definitely a lack of, like, the yellow lettering is missing here for sure. But besides that, it's okay. More importantly, the vinyl pressing sounds great. And that's really why I wanted it on vinyl, was just to get the sound of it. So having the original release on Repulse for the CD, now I got the vinyl thing to kind of round out the collection. But Deeds of Flesh, a really important band for me in terms of a lot of the stuff that followed them into from the late 90s into the early 2000s. Now, Dennis, he may listen to this and be like, not my thing, man. He's much more of a, I don't know, this is death metal the way it's not supposed to be played for his taste potentially, but it's 100% for mine, and that sort of rounds out the California selection for this. So 3 bands to rep California: Omen, Crew, Motley Crue, and Dawkins. So the next couple of records, I will stay within the metal lane, but I did want to break from that and talk about some bands that were sort of unrelated to California, that is. Okay. Next one. So Crimson Glory, Transcendence. One of those bands where, like, so sad that the key lineup didn't get more on record, like did not have enough. There's not enough recording history to this band to really, I think, probably stand along many of their peers, that by all means they deserve to be mentioned with, right? Like, they don't have like a tons of great records to their catalog, most likely because the band was so short-lived. And this, power prog thing also was sort of a very niche genre back in the 1980s. But man, just killer record. Some of the songs here, like, it opens with Lady of Winter, but the back end of this record, I think probably some of my favorite tracks. So In Dark Places, obviously the track Lonely, the music video is classic. And I really even like Eternal World. It has one of my favorite sort of like guitar breaks and solos on the entire record. Really dig that track. But Crimson Glory, Transcendence, that should stand up with the rest of them. Yeah, for sure. Tobias, Midnight's voice, like, in the same way probably people talk about sort of legendary musicians from the 1980s, right? Probably you could say the same thing about like Cliff Burton, right? Like, there's not enough actually recordings of him to justify his greatness, or I think for people to sort of hold on to him and keep talking about him the way they should. I feel the same way about Midnight, just passed too young. Not enough of his voice on record. Yeah, the third one, Jeff, for sure. It's odd, and at that point, sort of the scene has sort of moved. If this band was still intact, and they were to come back in the same way and have sort of resurgence, the way a band like, let's say, Kira Thungal, right, who has a new record coming out this year, just to see their get their due as a band, I would love to have that. So yeah. Moving on here, that's my 4th metal record, Crimson Glory, Transcendence. All right, number 2. Candlemass, Nightfall. I think most people, it's interesting. I even want to say Dennis was on I don't know if one of his own videos recently, and he may have, and I apologize if I'm misquoting you here, said that Epicus Dumicus Metallicus was potentially his favorite Candlemass record. And I totally get that. But Nightfall is just as good. And I think within sort of their influence, this is the record that sort of sets the precedent as to what Epic Doom is supposed to sound like. maybe you could even those early Candlemass records. This could be like the best doom record of all time potentially. So Devin's going with Ancient Dreams. That's fine. I mean, you're not wrong. But I absolutely love Nightfall, and is this reissued gatefold? Dude's having a good time, right? But goddamn, they look so young here. Anyway, there's that band photo. See if I can escape the glare. What a special time period for doom metal. Anyway, Messiah and the whole outfit and everything. Right. Tobias, I agree. But I do think Epicus Doomicus is kind of a whole different animal. Like the production on that feels like it is appealing to a much more raw doom sort of sound, which isn't bad. I just when I think of Candlemass, Nightfall is the first record that jumps to mind. And if you want to go with Ancient Dreams, that's cool too. But for me, it's always Nightfall. If I'm gonna have to pick one, and for sure. So just as good as the first classic Nightfall. Okay, moving into these last two records. These are some of my favorite Tales to really. So Stormrider, you go for Epicus. I mean, it's kind of would you at least say that it's a distinct one within their catalog? Like it sort of separates itself from the following three records purely based on the sound. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's at least my impression. Okay. So here we go. Next one. You would think I would have prepared and pulled these out of their sleeves, but no. If we're doing this live, it's going to be as messy as it can be. Okay. This is another very much Kellen death metal choice. Rebellion's Annihilation. Once again, this is my second OG copy, the initial one that came out on Hammerheart. But there's nothing really too special to this packaging. But anyway, there are the Rebellion guys. I think the original vocalist, I believe, has passed since this is released. That they have another band that has a brand new record coming out that just got released, I believe, on Agonia. They kind of folded things up around after Annihilation, actually, and there was like a compilation that came out a few years after. But Annihilation, man, this the sound of this record, there's like stories of like a fire bombing, like in the bombing of Dresden, for example, and there's just like so much sort of this firestorm that develops that it turns dirt to glass. The heat that would radiate from a kind of a firestorm like that, man. This it's completely on this record. Lots of fire for sure. Yeah, Christian gets a lot of I think because Black Forest Domain was sort of the first one that arrived in 1996, I believe. A lot of bands sort of followed that, but there's like a handful that really defined this sound coming out of Brazil, and I think in a lot of ways canonized what that era of not only Brazilian death metal sounded like, but these compete with anything circa Panzer Division, Marduk, or whatever. Like there's definitely some Polish bands, like Azrath comes to mind. Centurion is another one, a death metal band from this era that play in this like super fast, Angel Corpse kind of style. But Annihilation's a classic Brazilian death metal record for me. Anyway, so that's Rebellion, Annihilation. Set this off to the side as we're cruising through here. All right. Next one. If you'd asked me to choose between this record and the debut, it'd be super hard. But Eternus, and So the Night Became. Also, we're gonna say the last two choices. I did not intend for this to happen, but both Rebellion and Eternus do have new records coming out on Agonia. So this is not a Agonia Records infomercial, but nevertheless, Eternus for me. I mean, Beyond the Wandering Moon is the debut. There's an EP that had preceded that, but their first, the EP and the two full lengths that come out are completely unique, and it's kind of as a lot of what most would consider like the peak years of Norwegian black metal is sort of leaving, I think. And So the Night Became 1998, and I guess the band calls themselves dark metal, which is fair. To me, it was always a black metal sound. But the opener is like 12 minutes long. There's no whine like Blood's Crimson. Tobias, you're saying it's Bolt Thrower, but a thank you of black metal for sure. It's slow, groovy, down-tuned. So formally, I'm sure this is going to come up on an album club Wednesday, but I can definitely get some Bolt Thrower vibes here. It's just so Norwegian in terms of the black metal melodies, the songwriting, the themes. For me, it's undeniably a black metal record from Norway, and I'm sure there will be people who will argue that it's a death metal band, but for me, 100% black metal. Nevertheless, the band definitely considers themselves a dark metal band. If you don't own the early phase of this band's history, Eternus's history, you are missing out on some absolute classic, just extreme metal listens. No one else really, I guess Hades in some ways preceded them, but they're doing something a little bit different just in terms of the pacing, sort of the flow of these records. But And So the Night Became is another absolute Kellen favorite of mine. So that does it here for the metal listens, for the metal records that I chose. Just to recap for anyone who is just joining me, I'll just do this backwards. Oh, and we can do this live. We'll flip the cassette. So I opened this up. We are listening to a demo because this is a Dennis thing. So this is a demo for my initiation. Band out of Sweden. What should we listen to next? As we move out of there, let's move to a California band. How about that? So this is Depraver, EP that came out a handful of years ago. I want to say 2001. But I also believe they're from California. So we'll keep it analog. Dennis is into his cassettes. All right. Hey, Storm Rider, thank you so much for stopping by. I'll catch you guys later. All right. So moving from there, I was going to recap all the metal choices. For those who missed it, Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. Omen, Warning of Danger. Deeds of Flesh, Breeding the Anthropophagy. Crimson Glory, Transcendence. Rebellion, Annihilation. Candlemass, Nightfall. All right, and Eternus, and So the Night Became. Okay. So I kind of opened this up talking about how I think Dennis has an incredibly diverse collection, but we rarely get a chance to see it. So there's brief moments where he kind of pulls back the curtain, and you get to see how extensive and interesting, multifaceted his collection is. Okay. So I wanted to bring out a couple of records here. This will push me past 10 for the contest, but does it really matter? Okay. This is Gangstar, Step in the Arena. For my audience, some of these choices may be unfamiliar, but Gangstar is probably one of the more important duos in hip hop's history. You know, Guru, the MC, has since passed, but DJ Premier, I mean, one of the most important producers in hip hop's history. I don't think that's not a controversial statement by any means. And this band, this album, are incredibly formative in sort of defining what specifically hip hop is going to be out of the East Coast throughout the 90s. Dennis is so much of a West Coast. What I've seen, he's really into his G Funk, which is, I mean, no hate, whatever. You like West Coast hip hop, it's all good. But I always had a bit more of an affection towards the East Coast, and Gangstar is super important to that scene. DJ Premier is one of the most important producers in the entire genre, and Gangstar Step in the Arena, an absolute classic. Maybe, all these picks that coming up here are going to be potentially new for my audience, but hopefully Dennis will appreciate them. And I will say this, I thought, Dennis, if you catch this, I thought about doing like a golden era series, specifically because most people look at death metal's peak era from the late 80s to the early 90s. Also, hip-hop criticism tends to look at the exact same time frame historically as being the most formative creative in the genre's history. So I thought about doing like a death metal hip-hop pairing from those, like, whatever, 87, 86 to 93 or so. If you'd be interested in do something like that, let me know. This is an early 90s release. I believe 1992 is when Step in the Arena comes out, but classic hip hop release. All right. If Jeff is still around, he'll appreciate this one because this is 100% his wheelhouse. Mahavishnu Orchestra, Birds of Fire. I mean, I think when I first heard this, specifically Billy Cobham's drumming, I think I was in high school, and just completely, like, it was a very challenging record to get into. And you're the more sort of adventurous prog. It's one thing if you're picking up like Rush or King's Crimson, but Mahavishnu Orchestra was like a next step for me. It definitely sort of opened up, the door in terms of more adventurous musical listening. And Birds of Fires, I think that's their best known release. I could be wrong about that, but in terms of sales, classic band. I'm sure, you got John McLaughlin, who's been on a bunch of different projects. More importantly, probably it's associated with a lot of the more acid stuff coming from Miles Davis. But if you're into prog, for sure, Birds of Fire is definitely one to add to your list. Okay, here's one. A little bit sort of ambient electronica. God damn, this album cover. I do also think this is a OG press. I tried to keep a couple of them here for you. All right. So this is Steve Roach. I mean, how 1980s? I think this is 1982. But Traveler is the name of this second release for Steve Roach. Super cool story. I don't know how well, I guess if Dennis lives in Nevada now, he's probably well acquainted with it. And even I see Devin's in there, like, just like the eastern part of the California state, it turns into desert. And anyone who's been in the desert in the Southwest, like, sometimes it kind of feels like you're living on the moon. it is eerie, and the entire sort of ethnography of the area has this kind of psychedelic, trippy vibe to it, just because of how desolate and isolated it is. But Steve Roach lives out there, and in 1982, I believe, when this record comes out, is very much inspired by like the Berlin School, the Klaus Schultz kind of Tangerine Dream, and it's all over this record. He became a bit more interested in like more world music later on through the 90s. But I think he still lives out there somewhere in like Arizona, maybe New Mexico, just isolated from the world, writing these trippy electronica ambient. The title track, though, Traveler, is going to be my recommendation if someone wants to check this out. If you're into like ambient electronica, for sure check out Steve Roach. He's got tons of stuff. I mean, he's been putting out material consistently since essentially the 1980s, so over 4 decades of work that you can kind of go through. But I mean, when I saw this album cover, that sounds like it just looks like its era, and sounds like it too. 1980s electronica stuff. Okay, this last one, I wanted to bring a little bit of Kentucky into this stream. So, what can I say? 2 of the finest women Kentucky has ever produced. We have the Judds here. Now, I mean, look at Winona's face. I mean, first off, can we do a little comparison, contrast with the hair? Since we got these here, I'm going to go grab... Where is my... I need to pull this out because I want to say... All right. They say they were into glam. But if you... Okay, look at the hair on these gentlemen, and let's get out the Judds for comparison. Right? I kind of think the Judds have won this competition. 2 of Kentucky's finest right here. Anyway, now I know this stream is everyone is very much dedicated to the discography of the Judds. So for anyone who potentially objects to this being they should be the debut release, and because the first album's kind of a mini album, so maybe this disqualifies me from the competition. But I mean, it's an era of, let's just for a quick moment, an era in which country is really changing, and this record, I think, is a perfect sort of transition from all the 1970s stuff into what would eventually become a bit more of like a pop sensation. But man, these ladies nail it. The songwriting, the harmonies. There's a couple of moments like in Drops of Water when Winona really just comes into her own, the way that twang drops in. But nonetheless, I mean, another country classic of the 1980s for those so inclined. Look at these lovely ladies. I mean, once again, her face. What's going on with those eyes? It's trouble. That's all I'll say. They're trouble. And that's the perfect way to end this. We went through my metal streams. You got my metal choices, Dennis. Congrats on 2,000 subscribers. And all the best. I'm sure you'll be on your way here to 3,000 soon enough. But you can, I think Jeff's here in the chat. You can catch him this weekend talking about 80s classics. And let's see what else. For me, I'm gonna I have some time off. I'm leaving to go back to Oregon in October. So yeah, you're welcome, Jeff. The Judds are the perfect way to close this. What do you think is gonna be Deeds of Flesh? No, I'm bringing Why Not Me to the table. nevertheless, thank you to everyone who's watched. This is sort of an impromptu stream. It looks like I didn't get kicked off in the middle of it, playing music in the background. But yeah, like I was saying, I'm going to be gone for most of October. So I think I have one more album club or two more album clubs on Wednesday you can catch me at. And then I'm going to be gone through most of October. And I come back. I've got a stream. Let's see. I know with gas masks and hand grenades, you can hear me debating the definitive Wasp record. That'll probably be coming sometime in November. A couple other things that I've got planned, no real dates, but either way, thanks so much for watching. Jumped in here in the middle of my stream. Happy to have anyone come by and comment. You guys are the best. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a great weekend. Congrats, Dennis. Bye.